Samuel Hayes had traveled across the open plains many times in his life, but that winter day felt different from any he had known. The sky had turned a pale gray early in the afternoon, and by evening the clouds had thickened into a heavy blanket that promised trouble. He had hoped to reach his small ranch before the weather changed, but nature had its own plans. Snowflakes began to fall softly at first, then thickened into a heavy curtain that blurred the horizon. As the cold wind pushed against him, Samuel adjusted the scarf around his neck and told himself he only needed to keep moving forward. His horse, a calm and dependable mare named Lily, trudged through the deepening snow with slow, determined steps. Samuel patted her neck gently, encouraging her as the wind grew stronger. He could barely see more than a few yards ahead. The world around him had turned white, quiet, and strangely peaceful. Though he knew the storm could become dangerous if he didn't find shelter soon, Samuel had crossed this land enough times to know there was an abandoned cabin somewhere not too far ahead. It wasn't much, just 4 wooden walls and a roof, but it could keep him safe for the night. He kept his eyes open for it. But the thick snowfall made every shape look the same. Still, he moved forward, trusting his memory. Minutes stretched longer than they should have. The cold began creeping into his gloves, biting at his fingertips. Each breath formed a cloud of white mist that disappeared as quickly as it came. He focused on Lily's rhythm, letting it guide his thoughts and calm his nerves. As long as he stayed steady, he told himself, he would find the cabin before the storm reached its worst. Then, just as he began to wonder if he had missed the place entirely, a faint sound drifted through the wind. It was soft, almost too soft for him to notice at first. He pulled on Lily's reins gently, bringing her to a slow stop. The sound came again, light, muffled, and strange. He wasn't sure if the storm was tricking him, but the sound stirred something inside him. He listened carefully, leaning slightly forward. It came again, a tiny cry. Samuel frowned, confused. He turned his head in the direction of the sound and narrowed his eyes. Through the swirling snow, he couldn't see anything clearly. But he knew he had heard something. Something alive. Something calling out. He guided Lily a few steps toward the sound. It came again. Slightly louder this time, though still weak. It was a cry, but not the cry of an animal. It sounded too soft, too delicate. A thought crossed his mind that made him sit up straight. Could it be a child? The idea seemed almost impossible out here in the open plains during such a storm. But he trusted his instincts. He urged Lily forward, letting the sound guide him like a fragile thread in the wind. After a few careful steps, he noticed a small shape on the ground, slightly hidden under a layer of snow. His heart tightened. He slid off the horse quickly, landing with a crunch on the snow-covered earth. As he approached the small bundle, the sound came again, faint, shivering, and full of need. Samuel knelt down, brushing away the snow with the back of his glove. There, wrapped in a handmade cloth, lay a tiny infant. The child's face was red from the cold, and small tears glittered on the eyelashes. Samuel felt a rush of concern and disbelief at the same time. Someone must have been carrying this child. Someone must have been nearby. But in all directions he could see nothing but empty plains and falling snow. He didn't have time to wonder. The infant's survival depended on immediate warmth. Samuel scooped the baby up gently, holding him close to his chest. He felt how cold the small body was, and it made him move faster. He opened his coat and tucked the infant inside, letting his own body heat warm the tiny child. The baby gave a weak, exhausted sound but seemed to calm slightly against the warmth. Samuel whispered softly, trying to soothe the child even though he knew the baby couldn't understand his words. "It's all right now. I've got you. You're safe." His voice was steady, though his heart was beating faster than usual. He looked around one more time, hoping to see any sign of people, a camp, or a trail that might explain how the child ended up alone. But the storm had covered everything in a thick sheet of white. There were no footprints anymore, no clues, nothing to tell him how long the infant had been there. The sky darkened further, and he knew staying out in the open would put both of them at risk. There was no choice. He had to reach the abandoned cabin, and he had to reach it fast. He climbed back onto Lily carefully, holding the baby securely inside his coat with one arm. The wind blew harder now, making the snowfall swirl like white dust around them. Samuel leaned forward and guided Lily onward, urging her gently but firmly. The mare understood the urgency and pushed through the snow with renewed effort. Each minute felt longer than the last. Samuel kept checking the child, lifting the edge of his coat to make sure the tiny face was still warm. The baby's breathing was soft but steady, which gave him hope. The snow seemed to fall even thicker now, and the cold pressed against him like a heavy blanket. He kept reminding himself of the cabin, of its wooden walls that would block the wind and protect them both. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Samuel finally spotted a dark shape in the distance. It was small, slanted, and half covered by snow, but it was exactly what he needed. The cabin stood like a quiet guardian against the storm. Relief washed through him. He urged Lily forward, and soon the mare reached the small doorway. Samuel climbed down carefully, shielding the infant with his body as the wind blew strongly. He pulled open the creaking door and stepped inside. The cabin was cold and dusty, but it was shelter. He quickly closed the door behind him, stopping the worst of the wind. Inside, the air was still, and the silence felt comforting after the roaring storm outside. He laid the baby gently on his coat for just a moment while he checked the inside of the cabin. It was empty except for an old wooden table, a small stool, and the remains of a stone fireplace. The place had been abandoned long ago, but it would serve their needs for the night. Samuel gathered bits of old wood and dry grass left near the fireplace. With practiced hands, he lit a small fire, feeding it until warm light spread across the room. The fire crackled quietly, giving the space a soft orange glow. He picked the baby up again and sat near the fire, holding the child close to the warmth. Slowly, the baby's face began to relax. The shivering eased, and the breathing became calmer. Samuel felt a deep sense of relief. He didn't know who the baby belonged to, or how the child ended up alone in such terrible weather. But he knew one thing for certain. He had found the child for a reason. As the fire warmed the room, Samuel spoke softly, as though telling the child a bedtime story. "You're safe now. We'll get through this night together." End quote. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring or how many questions would arise. But for the moment, all that mattered was keeping the tiny infant warm, safe, and alive through the storm. The fire slowly grew brighter inside the abandoned cabin, filling the small room with a warm glow that pushed away the cold that had followed Samuel Hayes all day. He sat close to the fireplace, holding the infant gently in his arms. The baby was wrapped in a soft cloth that looked handmade, with careful stitches along the edges. The design was simple yet meaningful, and Samuel could tell someone had lovingly prepared it. The thought made his heart heavy. Somewhere, someone must be searching for this child. Worried and afraid, the child slowly relaxed in his arms, and Samuel could feel the tiny breaths becoming steadier. He felt grateful for that. For a moment, he simply watched the firelight dance across the wooden walls and listened to the gentle crackling sound. It felt peaceful, but he knew the night would not be easy. The storm outside was growing stronger. The wind rattled the cabin door now and then, reminding him that the world outside remained harsh. He gently lifted the edge of the cloth to check the infant's face. The baby's cheeks were warming now, and the eyes were closed, as if finally resting after a long struggle. Samuel smiled gently, his breath soft and warm on the child's forehead. "You're safe here," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was saying it to comfort the baby or himself. His mind drifted as he looked around the cabin. He had stayed there before during past travels. He remembered fixing the broken window once and leaving some firewood behind. The place felt familiar, almost like an old friend offering him shelter again. But this time, he wasn't alone, and that changed everything. He leaned back slightly, letting the baby rest against his chest, and he began thinking about what he should do next. Dawn would eventually arrive, and with daylight came decisions. He knew the child wasn't from a settler family, The handmade cloth and the patterns on it suggested the baby was from a Comanche tribe. Samuel respected the tribes deeply. He understood their culture and often admired the way they lived close to nature. But he also knew misunderstandings between settlers and tribes were common, especially during unpredictable times. He imagined riding toward a Comanche group with a child in his arms. Would they understand that he found the infant alone in the snow? Or would they suspect something else? The thought made him uneasy. He knew he had done nothing wrong, yet fear of being misunderstood was real. Still, leaving the child alone had never been an option, and he had no regrets about saving the tiny life now sleeping peacefully in his arms. The fire crackled again, snapping him out of his thoughts. Samuel carefully placed the baby beside him on his folded coat, making sure the infant was close to the fire but not too close. He then stood up and looked for anything useful in the cabin. In one corner, he found a small metal pot left over from the last traveler. He dusted it off and decided to warm some broth for himself and maybe a bit for the child later if needed. As he mixed snow with dried herbs he kept in his bag, Samuel's thoughts continued to wander. He wondered how long the child had been out in the storm. Could the baby's family be close by? Maybe they had been traveling when the storm separated them. Maybe they were still searching. The uncertainty made his chest tighten with concern. The broth warmed slowly over the fire, filling the cabin with a soft, comforting smell. Samuel sat back down and took a careful sip. The warmth spread through him, calming his nerves. He glanced at the baby again. The little one stirred slightly, then settled. Samuel reached out and gently touched the child's tiny hand. It was warmer now, no longer cold like before. That small improvement brought him more comfort than the fire or the broth. Hours passed quietly. The storm continued to howl outside. But inside the cabin, the fire created a small, safe world. Samuel stayed awake, watching the child's every movement, making sure the infant remained warm and comfortable. He knew babies were fragile, and he didn't want anything to happen under his watch. Sometime around midnight, the wind outside grew even louder. The cabin walls groaned softly, and snow began to pile up against the door. Samuel added more wood to the fire, making the room brighter. He wrapped the child a bit more securely and held the little one close again. He began speaking softly, almost as if telling a bedtime story. "You know," he said gently, "I've crossed these plains many times, and I've seen storms like this, but I've never found something as precious as you out there." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Seems the plains had a plan for us tonight." The baby made a soft sound, and Samuel's expression softened. He rocked gently, comforting the child even though the infant wasn't awake. It felt natural, as if his arms had known exactly what to do from the moment he picked the baby up from the snow. He tried to imagine the infant's family. Perhaps a mother who crafted the cloth with love, a father who taught the child's older siblings to ride ponies, or a grandmother who hummed gentle songs by the fire. The image was warm and peaceful. Samuel hoped they were safe. He hoped they would be reunited with their child soon. As the hours went by, Samuel's concern grew. The longer the storm lasted, the harder it would be for anyone to find the cabin or travel safely in search of the child. But he couldn't leave until daylight. The storm was too strong, and traveling in such darkness would put both him and the baby in danger. All he could do was wait and pray that morning would come with calmer skies. At one point, Samuel leaned back and closed his eyes. But he didn't let himself sleep. He didn't want to risk the fire dying out or missing any sign from the infant. He stayed alert, listening to the baby's breathing and the wind outside. Eventually, near the early hours of dawn, the storm began to ease. The wind softened, and the snow started falling more gently. A pale light crept into the cabin through the small cracks in the wooden boards. Samuel stood up and walked to the door, opening it slightly. The air outside was cold but calmer. The plains were covered in a thick white blanket, untouched and quiet. No tracks, no movement, no signs of life anywhere. He closed the door gently and looked at the child again. "All right," he whispered. "As soon as the sun rises, we'll head out. Someone out there must be looking for you." He packed his things quietly, preparing for the journey ahead. He checked Lily outside, brushing snow off her back and giving her a warm pat. The mare snorted softly, as if understanding the importance of the day ahead. Samuel returned inside, picked up the baby, and sat near the fading fire, letting the last bit of warmth reach them both. The infant opened its eyes, slightly dark, curious, and gentle, and Samuel felt a wave of determination wash over him. Whatever challenges waited outside, he would face them. Morning was coming, and with it, the next part of their unexpected journey. The morning light arrived slowly, spreading across the plains like a soft golden blanket that gently pushed away the shadows of the long night. Samuel Hayes opened his eyes the moment he felt a faint warmth touching the cabin's wooden walls. He had not slept at all, but he did not feel tired. His mind stayed alert throughout the night, focused on the tiny infant, resting safely in his arms. Now, with daylight finally here, he felt a sense of renewed strength. It was time to move. The storm outside had ended, leaving behind a world of deep white snow that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sky was clear, painted in pale blue colors that made the entire landscape look calm and peaceful. But Samuel knew the peace was only on the surface. Somewhere across the plains, people were worried. Somewhere, a family was probably hoping to find this child. He carefully checked the baby, touching the tiny cheeks with gentle fingers. They were warm now, no longer cold like before. The infant blinked up at him, the eyes wide and curious, as though trying to understand the world around them. Samuel smiled softly. "Good morning, little one," he whispered. "We've got a long day ahead of us." He wrapped the child securely inside his coat again and stepped outside. Lily, his loyal mare, was already awake. She shook her head lightly, sending off small flakes of snow. Samuel brushed her gently, speaking to her in quiet words that made her ears flick back with recognition. He checked her saddle, adjusted the straps, and made sure she was ready for the journey. With everything prepared, Samuel mounted the horse carefully, holding the infant close to his chest. The cold morning air touched his face, but the sun gave him hope. He turned Lily toward the open plains, trusting that somewhere ahead he would find signs of the Comanche tribe, or at least someone who had seen them. The snow was deep, but Lily moved steadily, her strong legs pushing through the softness. Samuel scanned the horizon as he rode. The plains looked endless, but he knew this land well. He looked for anything unusual: smoke, footprints, distant shapes, anything that might help him. As the sun rose higher, the snow glittered like tiny crystals. The air was cold but calm, and the wide sky above them seemed peaceful. The baby made small sounds occasionally, soft murmurs that reminded Samuel he wasn't traveling alone. Each sound gave him a sense of responsibility, a reminder that he was carrying a precious life. After traveling for some time, Samuel noticed something in the distance, a small movement, a hint of color against the white fields. It was a figure leading a mule, moving slowly across the snow-covered land. As Samuel rode closer, he recognized the man. It was Mr. Curtis, a traveling trader who often journeyed between settlements and tribes, exchanging goods and sharing news. Samuel felt a small wave of relief. The trader might know something. He guided Lily toward him. The trader stopped when he noticed someone approaching. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Samuel holding something close inside his coat. "Morning, Sam," the trader greeted. His voice carried curiosity. "Didn't expect to see anyone out here after that storm." Samuel nodded and replied, "Morning, Curtis. I found something during the storm." He opened his coat slightly so the trader could see the infant. Curtis's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A child? Out in that weather?" He shook his head slowly. "That's a blessing the little one survived." Samuel gently adjusted the infant's cloth. "I don't know how long the baby was in the snow, but I found him just before the storm got too strong. I'm thinking this child is from a Comanche group passing through." Curtis's expression grew thoughtful. "You might be right. I heard yesterday that a large Comanche band was camped not far from the northern ridge, and early this morning, before sunrise, I saw several riders moving fast, like they were searching for something. Samuel's heart grew heavier with understanding. Searching for the child. Most likely, Curtis said softly. They seemed worried. They rode past me without stopping. You know how strong family ties are among them. If they lost an infant, they'd turn every stone on these plains to find him. Samuel nodded. It made perfect sense. He knew the Comanche loved their children deeply. Losing one would fill the entire group with fear and sadness. But another thought came to him: these riders didn't know him. They wouldn't know how he found the child, and misunderstandings could be dangerous, even without anyone meaning harm. Curtis must have sensed the concern in his eyes. Sam, he said kindly, you did the right thing. Anyone can see that. Just approach calmly. Show them the child first. Let them understand your heart. Samuel took in a slow breath. I hope it will be enough. Curtis nodded. It will. They respect honesty more than anything. The baby stirred again, letting out a soft sound, almost like a sigh. Samuel felt a wave of protectiveness. I need to find them before the day ends, he said. The child needs to be with his family. Curtis pointed toward the north. Head that way. You'll likely find tracks soon. They're spreading out, searching everywhere. Samuel thanked him, and the trader wished him luck before continuing his own journey. Samuel turned Lily toward the north, feeling a stronger sense of purpose now. He held the baby carefully, keeping the child warm against his chest. The ride became a quiet one. The plains were open, and the only sounds were the soft crunch of snow beneath Lily's hooves and the gentle breaths of the child. Samuel watched the sky, the land, and the patterns in the snow. Searching for any clue, he followed faint signs of movement, small marks, disturbed patches of snow, broken twigs that suggested riders had passed through. As he moved farther north, he began to feel the air grow tense. Something silent but strong seemed to fill the space around him. He trusted Lily's instincts, and she walked slower now. Ears pricked forward, Samuel knew that meant they were not alone. He scanned the horizon carefully. At first, he saw nothing but snow and distant hills. But then, in the far distance, he noticed faint shapes moving small at first, then slowly becoming clearer. Riders, many riders, they were scattered across the plains, searching in wide patterns. Their movements were controlled, focused, purposeful. Samuel felt his heart beat a little faster. He tightened his hold on the infant gently. It's all right, he whispered softly. We're doing this together. He rode slowly, not wanting to cause alarm. He didn't raise his hand yet, not until someone noticed him. He hoped the riders would see the child before anything else. The sun shone on the snowy land, creating a bright glow that made the riders' shadows stretch long across the plains. Samuel watched as one rider turned toward him. Then, another. And another. Soon, several riders began heading in his direction. They moved with speed but also with caution, as though unsure of what they were approaching. Samuel's heartbeat grew louder in his ears. He took a slow breath and held the infant closer. He would explain everything. Every step. Every moment of the night. He hoped they would listen. The riders were getting closer now. The air felt charged, heavy with suspense. Lily shifted her weight slightly. Sensing the tension, Samuel whispered one more gentle promise to the child. You'll be home soon. Haups, very for Mike, very for on 4. And then he waited as the riders approached. Samuel watched as the riders approached, their figures growing clearer with every passing second. They rode in a straight line at first, then slowly spread out as they neared him, forming a gentle arc around the area without closing in too fast. Their movement was calm but careful, as if they wanted to understand who he was before coming too close. Samuel could feel the cold air brushing against his face, mixing with the soft warmth of the child resting inside his coat. He took in a slow breath and lifted one hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. His other arm remained wrapped securely around the infant. The baby stirred a little, making a soft sound that only strengthened Samuel's resolve to remain calm and clear. The riders stopped at a respectful distance. Their horses stood tall and quiet, leaving only the sound of breathing and the soft crunch of snow beneath hooves. The group looked focused, their eyes moving between Samuel and the small part of the child's blanket visible from his coat. One rider stepped forward. He was older, with a calm and steady expression. His eyes held a depth that spoke of wisdom and leadership. The other riders seemed to wait for him to speak first. He guided his horse a few steps closer and paused, giving Samuel enough space to feel safe. Samuel lowered his hand slowly and nodded respectfully. "Good morning," he said in a soft, steady voice. "Hoping to show peace. I believe you're searching for this little one." He gently pulled back the edge of his coat, just enough for them to see the baby's face. The infant blinked softly in the daylight, and a quiet murmur escaped the tiny lips. The leader's expression changed instantly. His eyes softened, and his shoulders relaxed slightly. A wave of relief seemed to wash over him as he gazed at the child. The riders behind him exchanged looks filled with quiet hope and emotion. The leader dismounted from his horse with calm movements. His steps were steady as he approached, but he remained respectful, giving Samuel space. Samuel understood the importance of this moment. He continued holding the baby carefully, waiting for the leader to reach him. When the leader stood before him, Samuel offered a small explanation. "I found the baby during the snowstorm," he said. "He was alone on the ground, cold, but alive. I brought him to shelter through the night." The leader nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the child. Samuel could see gratitude forming in his expression. The leader spoke in a gentle tone, filled with respect. Though his exact words were simple, Samuel could feel the sincerity behind them. "You kept him safe," Samuel smiled faintly. "I did what anyone would have done." The leader's gaze shifted from the child back to Samuel, as if trying to understand the kind of man who would risk himself in a storm to save a child that was not his own. Samuel held the gaze calmly, letting his sincerity show without any effort. Another rider came forward, a woman wearing a warm, fur-lined cloth around her shoulders. Her eyes immediately fell on the infant, and a soft gasp escaped her lips. She looked at the leader, then at Samuel, her expression filled with emotion. Samuel could sense that she must have been deeply connected to the child, perhaps the baby's mother or close family. She reached out with trembling hands, but she waited for Samuel's permission, showing respect. Samuel gently nodded and slowly transferred the infant into her care. The movement was careful, smooth, and filled with quiet importance. The woman cradled the baby against her chest, tears gathering in her eyes as she whispered soft words filled with love and relief. Samuel stepped back slightly, giving her space. Watching the reunion filled his heart with warmth. The baby made a soft sound, recognizing the familiar embrace. The woman smiled through her tears, gently swaying with the child in her arms. The leader approached Samuel once more and placed a hand over his own heart in a gesture of deep respect. Samuel did the same in return. Understanding the meaning, it was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of gratitude and trust. More riders came closer now, forming a supportive circle around the mother and child. They spoke to one another in calm tones, filled with relief. Some looked at Samuel with expressions of appreciation. Others nodded politely. The air felt peaceful now, the tension completely gone. Samuel looked at the group around him. He saw families, elders, strong riders, and young men all united by the same purpose: to protect and care for one another. He admired their unity and felt humbled to have played even a small part in returning their missing child. The leader signaled for one of the younger riders to step forward. The young man approached Samuel with a small cloth-wrapped item in his hand. The leader spoke softly, explaining that it was a token, something given only during moments of true gratitude. Samuel accepted it with both hands, feeling the soft fabric and the handmade design. It was simple but meaningful, carrying symbols of strength, family, and honor. Samuel bowed his head slightly as a silent way of saying thank you. Words didn't seem necessary in that moment. The connection felt deeper than spoken language. "Lily, Samuel's horse, shifted slightly behind him. Samuel turned to give her a reassuring pat. She had remained calm through everything, sensing the peaceful energy around them. He felt grateful for her too. She had helped him survive the storm, and now she stood steady beside him as he witnessed this heartfelt reunion. The leader glanced toward the sky, then back at Samuel. It was time for the group to return to their people and share the good news. The mother held the child securely, walking toward her horse with gentle steps. The riders gathered around her protectively, forming a circle that symbolized unity and safety. Before leaving, the leader placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder, giving a firm but kind squeeze of appreciation. Samuel returned the gesture with a respectful nod. The riders began to move as one, guiding their horses gently across the snowy plains. Their silhouettes slowly drifted farther and farther away, sunlight reflecting softly off the snow beneath their hooves. Samuel watched them until they became small shapes in the distance, eventually blending into the wide, open land. He let out a slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The morning felt brighter now, not just because of the sun, but because of what had just happened. He had witnessed a moment of hope, love, and unity, a moment that would stay with him for his entire life. He looked down at the small token in his hand, turning it gently. It reminded him of something simple but powerful. Kindness could reach across any distance, any barrier, any difference. It could build bridges where nothing else could. Samuel mounted Lily again, feeling lighter inside. The journey ahead no longer felt lonely. He had done something meaningful, something that mattered. As he rode across the quiet plains, he whispered softly to the wind, "May they all stay safe." The snow glimmered under the sun, and for the first time that day, Samuel felt truly at peace. The morning after the long night of waiting, James stepped outside the cabin and looked at the wide land stretching across the snowy field. The wind was softer than before, and the clouds had begun to open, letting pale sunlight shine on the white ground. Everything felt calm, almost peaceful, but inside his heart, he was still unsure about what the day would bring. The Comanche infant, now warm and sleeping safely inside, had changed everything. He could not imagine leaving the child alone, but he also knew that the child was not his to keep. There was a community, a family, waiting somewhere, and they deserved to know the child was alive. When he looked in the distance, he expected the Comanche group to be standing there, as they had the night before. But the area where they had waited was empty. For a moment, James wondered if they had left during the night, unsure of him. But then he heard a calm voice from behind the nearby trees. A Comanche elder stepped forward with a gentle expression, signaling that their people were close, simply waiting for the right moment to return. The elder walked slowly toward the cabin, showing that he meant no harm. James felt grateful for the respectful way the group behaved. It made it easier for him to trust the situation. He nodded and walked with the elder toward the door, both men understanding that the day would bring an important decision. Inside the cabin, the infant was awake and moving quietly, wrapped in soft blankets, completely unaware of the weight of the moment. James lifted the child carefully, feeling the small hands grip his finger. Even though he had known the baby for only a short time, there was a strange feeling of connection, as if the storm had brought them together for a reason he could not fully understand yet. When the elder saw the baby safe and calm, a warm look appeared on his face. It was almost as though he was silently thanking James with his expression alone. The elder introduced himself through soft words and hand signs, making it clear that he respected James deeply for what he had done. James tried to explain how he had found the child, how the snow was thick, how he followed the faint sounds, and how he felt he needed to help without hesitation. Even though their languages were different, both men understood each other well enough. The elder placed his hand on his chest and then gently touched the child's blanket, a gesture that showed appreciation from the heart. Soon, more members of the Comanche group approached quietly, their expressions calm, their movements gentle. None of them carried anger or fear. They were only concerned for the infant, relieved to see the child alive and healthy. One of the women stepped forward. Her eyes brightened instantly when she saw the infant, and James realized that she might be a close relative. She stretched her arms toward the child, her hands steady but emotional. James hesitated for a brief second. Not because he didn't want to give the child back, he fully believed the baby belonged with them, but because part of him felt a little sad at the thought of saying goodbye. Still, he knew what he had to do. He slowly placed the baby into her waiting arms. As soon as the infant felt her hold, the child settled effortlessly, as if recognizing someone familiar. The woman looked at James with deep gratitude. No words were spoken, but the meaning was clear and strong. The elder then motioned for James to walk with them outside the cabin. When they reached the open snowfield, the entire group formed a quiet circle around James. It wasn't threatening at all. It felt like a small ceremony, something meaningful that they believed was important. The circle was wide, giving him space, but the unity of the group made the moment feel special. James stood still, unsure of what would happen next. One by one, several members of the group stepped forward. Each person gently placed a small item near his feet. A feather, a beaded string, a carved wooden piece, a bracelet made of folded grass. These were not random objects. They were tokens of respect, symbols of appreciation within their culture. By offering them, they were showing that they honored his actions. James had never received anything like this in his life. He felt humbled, almost emotional, standing there in the cold morning air, surrounded by people who were thanking him in the deepest way they knew. The elder then stepped forward again, his voice calm like flowing water, speaking in his language while using gentle motions with his hands. Though James could not understand every word, he knew the message. You cared for one of ours. You protected a life during a storm. Today, you are not seen as a stranger. You are seen as a friend. James bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect he hoped they would understand. The elder smiled softly, clearly appreciating the effort. The group then slowly opened their circle, giving space for the woman holding the child to step forward. She looked at James once more, her eyes filled with sincere emotion. She placed a small, soft cloth in his hand, something she had carried with her. It was her personal token, a simple reminder of the child whose life he had protected. James held it carefully, feeling honored. Not long after, the group began preparing to leave. Their movements were organized and graceful, as if they had done this many times before. They had found what they came for, and now it was time to continue their journey. The woman carrying the baby stayed close to the elder, and before leaving, she turned to James again and nodded. It was a quiet farewell, but also a promise that his kindness would never be forgotten among their people. James watched them move across the snowy land, their figures becoming smaller as they walked farther away. The wind picked up again, but it felt different now, no longer stormy or punishing. It carried a calm, almost peaceful sound, as if nature itself was acknowledging everything that had happened. As the Comanche group disappeared over a distant hill, James felt a mix of emotions. He felt proud for doing the right thing, grateful for the unexpected trust he had experienced, and touched by the deep sense of community he had witnessed. Most of all, he felt changed. Something within him had grown a stronger understanding of human connection, kindness, and the value of helping others without expecting anything in return. When he walked back to his cabin, the place felt strangely quiet without the child's small sounds. But it also felt brighter, filled with a sense of warmth that wasn't there before. He placed the small cloth, the token from the woman, on a shelf near the window. It was simple, but it carried a story that he knew he would remember for the rest of his life. That night, James sat near his fire, thinking about how a single moment in a snowstorm had brought two completely different worlds together. He realized that sometimes the most unexpected situations create the strongest connections. He did not know if he would ever see the Comanche group again, but he knew that their paths had crossed in a way that would stay with him forever. As the fire glowed softly, he closed his eyes and felt a quiet peace. The storm had passed. The child was safe, and he had gained something priceless. A reminder that kindness can grow even in the coldest places, and that understanding between people is possible when hearts remain open.